Hi, welcome to another episode of Creative on the Bed. My name is Temidayo Johnson. Have you ever had a very funny experience with anyone you've worked with in the past? A client or even a colleague? And the story was a very funny story. I see that many people do not always experience funny, weird stories with people that they work in the same field with because maybe there's sort of like a little bit of understanding of what goes into the work and things like that. But I noticed that many times regards to other people who are more like paying clients or people who they expect to pay them, there is this funny thing in where they do not have like full knowledge of what it takes to get the work done sometimes. So I thought about it today. Maybe it's going to be not like a talking type episode, but it's like going through one or two stories where people have had funny experiences with people that they've worked with. So most likely interactions they had with clients and the funny experiences that they had in that space. To start with, I'll start with a personal thing. I don't think I've had very many funny experiences with clients or most of the people that I generally work with. They have at least a very basic understanding of what the job would entail. So I don't have as much. I remember at the time someone asked if I could make something go viral. So I was supposed to create like a video content for them, and the question the person asked me was, "Oh, if I pay you this amount, does it mean that, it's going to reach a lot of people?" And I was like, "Oh, that's not really part of my job. I really don't understand what that means." So things like that, I think that's one of the funniest things I can remember. Another experience I remember is like I worked with someone, and at the time I was a bit naive. I didn't understand how the work was going to be done in a very professional manner, and the person asked for the final video, and I was like, okay, I've had issues of people not paying me and not meeting up their end of the bargain. So what I did was I did the video, everything, but I didn't put the final text that was supposed to be in the video, their branding and things like that. And the person called and was really furious and was just shouting at me. And I was like, okay, I don't get it. I'm just going to put those things once I get the final payment, because that's all that is left and it's quite basic. But the person just kept on rambling, and we went about that back and forth for about a week. The person said, oh, they had to put everything in the video for them to see it before they would make their final payment and all that. And I felt like if they had all that, then I had no bargaining power to the video. I can't remember if I did it or I didn't, but most times I just would not do stuff like that. And maybe one more would be contracts. I've had to avoid the earlier situation I just mentioned. I now use contracts. So even if I don't send someone a contract to sign, I put terms on my invoice, and in the terms it's just written there plain and clear. If you don't see it, if you don't read it, I'm still protected with that. But I know that I remember that there was a time when I used to try to make people sign the contract, and the person was just hell bent on not signing the contract. And I was like, why don't you want to sign the contract? Why don't you want to? And the person was like, oh, like if you take me to court for whatever reason, you're going to win. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Do you intend to not pay or fulfill the obligation that is written on the contract? So it was just funny stories like that. But today, I would take less of my own stories and check stories I see online. I got this from Peter Pixels, and says after doing some work for a corporation, their payment was overdue, and I was forced to come to their office tower downtown. After signing some paperwork at the reception on the 28th floor, client says, bring this to our accountant on the 34th floor and they'll give you your money. Then the person says, okay, I got it. Then the client says, do you know where the 34th floor is? And the person points up. The client says, that's right. Do you know how to get there? And the creative person says, I'll go with the elevator. And the client says, I was thinking the stairs, but he looks at the other person working at the reception who nods. Yes, that will also work. That will not work. So it's like The person goes to, I'm sure I'm not extremely good at reading and conveying this. I'm reading and processing at the same time. So this person goes to get their payment on the 27th floor of a building, and the place they're going to get their payment is on the 34th floor. So that's minimum of like 7 floors above, and they want to get their payment. There's an elevator, and the person says use the stairs. Yo, that's actually crazy. I don't know what I've done in that position. I'll probably still use the elevator. I won't care. So this one's from Reddit, from Quora, and this person says after giving a presentation on cloud computing at an IT sales conference in Dubai, a client wanted to order 3 clouds. This was a multi-million-dollar proposition. On further inquiry, it became evident that the client liked the cloud images on the presentation slides and wanted to order 3 of those for his mansion. He thought we were selling decorative clouds. Wow, that's stupid. Nightmare client. After sending 2 invoices for payment, I sent another and called the clients when the receipt that they received it came back. So the client says, why are you calling me? And says, you haven't paid and this is the 3rd invoice I have sent. And then the client says, it's even more than the last one. And says, yes, the contract you signed stated that I would add a late fee for payment. The client says, you mean I have to pay? Okay. Says, you mean I have to actually pay you? I thought you were joking. And the person says, what on earth made you think that? The client referred and said, you're a freelancer. And he said, and? Well, you work for free. If you are supposed to be paid, you'd be called a paid lancer or something. That's a joke. That's just a joke. So this person says, you mean I actually have to pay you? I thought you were joking. And the person says, what made you think you were not supposed to pay me? And the client says, you're a freelancer. If you're supposed to get paid, you're supposed to be a paid lancer or something. That's a very bad joke, I guess. Okay, another one. Client says, I'm not sure about blue. And the person says, actually that's green. And the client says, who is the client? And the person says, you. And the client says, and what color is it? The creative person says blue. Right. Now let's see what other shades of blue we have. And the person says, we eventually settled for pine tree blue. I get that. Because sometimes when you're trying to like tell them, oh, what you're saying is probably wrong. I mean, they just resort to telling you that, yeah, I know what I'm saying because I'm paying you. Yeah, that's a very funny story. This is another one. It says the sound of racism. So the client says, I don't mean to sound racist, but the creative says, but what? Client says, but the site is too black. And the creative says, like literally too black. Yes, the background is too black. That's not racist. That has nothing to do with race. And the client's like, whew, I can never tell with you black people what's offensive and what's not. I have to read this again. I don't mean to sound racist, but the site is too black. The background is too black. It says, that's not racist. That has nothing to do with race. I can never tell with you black people what's offensive and what's not. That's racist. That's actually racist. That's the racist part. Another one. So the person says, when you want to add a new page to the website, you can type it here. If you want, the system can send new content to someone in your organization for review before it goes live. And the client says, can you give me an example of when we will do this? Says, well, if you want, you can have your legal people review the new text before it goes up on the site, so you know you don't get sued because of. The person then interrupts and says, sued? Who's suing us? I don't want to get sued. The person says, no, I'm just saying your legal people could review any changes to the site. And the person says, this guy is telling me we could be sued. I don't like this. No, it's so you wouldn't be sued. But that's just an example. It's just if someone wants to read the contents before. I don't like the sound of this. I think this one is just a communication problem. Like, you're not communicating properly with the person. I've experienced something like this before with contracts with people. Before I literally switched my method to terms. I live in Nigeria, and I feel like many people, when they hear contract, they take it so seriously. And I think it's actually quite serious. When they hear contract, it's like serious business to them. So it's like they don't want to hear contracts when you're telling them that, oh, this, you have signed my contract and things like that. Because it's business, it's at the end of the day, it's quite serious. So they sort of have to sign a contract. But finding that balance and making them understand that these are my terms, which is how I found my own middle ground to the whole situation, is like terms and conditions. Like, it's like everybody hears that all the time. So people hear terms. So terms seems like it's more palatable to hear. I've been working for a number of years, and for over 3 years I've been using terms. I've never used contracts, and people don't they don't sort of have like an obligation, or they don't have a negative reaction to that. But when people see contract, most times they don't have a very positive reaction to it. So I can understand where that's coming from, when people feel like, oh, I can get sued because I signed a contract and things like that. So yeah, I sort of understand that one. And by the way, it's usually the same thing in the terms that most people use, that I send with their invoice. It's the same thing that usually there with the contract, but using that terms is just something to make it more palatable and make them understand that, okay, it's not that serious if the contract is something like a very big word to you. But whatever works for everybody. Some people would never send anything without sending a contract, and I understand that as well. But knowing the type of clientele that you have, the kind of people that you work with, sometimes if everyone is apprehensive when they hear contracts, I think it's just better if you can work with terms rather than contracts, even though it's exactly the same thing. I know there's not like a very short list of things that people would have encountered in different creative fields that they are in. There are people who are going to experience horrific stories, maybe just funny stories like some of the one I read, but definitely people usually experience different things in different fields. And I feel like the best way to deal with most of them, especially when it's like a situation that is probably new to you, like even people that have been working in the field for a while, they can meet a client that would just pose like a question that is sort of new to them. So I don't think it's about how long you've been working in the field. Sometimes you just get to meet unique people, and sometimes difficult people, and sometimes very funny people. So to deal with it, sometimes I think the best thing to do is just to ask questions, like maybe not from the person, like other people in your field, and say, oh, I'm dealing with X, Y, and Z. What do you think I should do? Someone asked for this, and I think it's a very odd thing to say, but how do I deal with this? So I think things like that would help. Things like, have a list here that says things like, say, people saying, can you do it for less? Can we get it by tomorrow? Can you make it bigger? Can you make that smaller? Can you make it pop? Depending on people that are in graphics field or visual fields, can you make it like someone else's work? Those things are things that people would just generally hear, and I feel like depending on the level that everyone is on, people have heard these things. Someone would have known how to deal with these things, and just by just asking people that are in your same field, it's going to be easier for you to like be able to deal with those things. So I feel like asking questions sometimes, no matter how weird or funny or tasking the situation is something that would help. You could ask people in the same field. If you don't have anyone around you, just find someone online. I remember, I think it's about 4 years ago, I had a very peculiar situation with a client, and I did not know what to do. I thought about how to deal with that, and I literally just reached out to someone I was following on Instagram, and the person genuinely, I reached out to about 4 people, and only one person responded. And till today, I have not even spoken to the person since then. But I just needed the person to answer the question for me, and they did just that for me. So I think reaching out to people asking is like a way to help yourself out of dicey situations sometimes. So I don't have much to say today. I don't have much else to go on about, but I think in everything you do, put in your best and hope for the best as well. Thank you for tuning in. I know it's it's not that short, but like it's a short episode. Thank you for joining. If you're listening anywhere you're listening from, please remember to like, subscribe, share on any platform that you're on. Interact. If you have any funny story, please put it and give it as feedback. I would love to hear whatever funny story you have as well. Thank you. My name is Temidayo Johnson, and you'd hear me in another 2 weeks.